In the early morning hours of August 9, 1942, the United States Navy lost 4 heavy cruisers in a single engagement. No American fleet had suffered a defeat this severe since the War of 1812. The Battle of Savo Island lasted just 32 minutes. In that time, a Japanese force of 7 cruisers and 1 destroyer inflicted more damage on the U.S. Navy than the Japanese had managed in 6 months of war. The official U.S. Navy history later described it as the worst defeat ever inflicted on the United States Navy in a fair fight. The phrase fair fight does a lot of heavy lifting there. To understand why Savo Island happened, you have to understand the condition of the men involved. The Allied force guarding the invasion beaches at Guadalcanal had been on continuous alert for 48 hours. Their radar sets, new technology they were still learning to trust, had been picking up false contacts all night. By 1:30 in the morning on August 9th, when the Japanese cruiser force slipped through the darkness without being detected, the lookouts on the Allied picket ships had been staring into the black for so long that, honestly, their eyes had stopped distinguishing real objects from imagined ones. The Japanese commander, Vice Admiral Mikawa, had spent his entire career training for night surface combat. The Japanese Navy had really perfected the use of the Type 93 torpedo, a weapon so advanced that, well, the Americans didn't even know it existed. The Type 93 carried a 1,000-pound warhead, had a range of over 20 miles, and left no wake at all. The Americans called it the Long Lance after the war because, you know, they needed a name for the thing that kept sinking their ships without warning. The Allied force was arranged in 2 patrol groups, north and south of Savo Island. The logic was coverage. The problem was that each group was separated by miles of dark water, and honestly, nobody had told them how to coordinate if the enemy arrived in force. At 1:43 in the morning, Mikawa's force opened fire. Within just 2 minutes, the Australian cruiser Canberra had taken 2 torpedoes and 24 shell hits. She was dead in the water, her captain killed, and she never fired a shot in return. The USS Astoria, the Northern Group's lead ship, was caught so completely by surprise that her crew initially thought the gunfire was from a friendly ship conducting an unannounced drill. Her captain ordered ceasefire while he confirmed the target. By the time the captain realized the gunfire was Japanese, the ship was already mortally wounded. She sank later that morning, having spent her final moments fighting a battle she was never given a chance to prepare for. The USS Vincennes was struck by as many as 70 shells in 10 minutes. Her radar operator had detected the Japanese force 15 minutes before the attack began, but the officer of the deck dismissed the contact as friendly ships returning from a patrol. This was not incompetence. This was a Navy that had trained for gunnery duels in broad daylight, not integrated radar warfare at night. The systems to share radar data across a fleet didn't exist. The doctrine to trust the machine over the lookout didn't exist. The men were following the procedures they had. The USS Chicago, which was actually the flagship of the Southern Group, took a torpedo in the very first minute and then withdrew from the battle. Her captain later explained that, well, he assumed the attack was over and that staying in the area would only invite further damage. Mikawa, after 32 minutes of destruction, made a decision that, honestly, is still debated to this day. He withdrew without attacking the Allied transport ships anchored off Guadalcanal, the supply vessels that, if sunk, would have stranded the Marines there with no ammunition and no food. Mikawa assumed that American carriers were nearby. He didn't know they had actually withdrawn the previous day. He calculated that risking his force at dawn against carrier aircraft just wasn't worth the certainty of destroying the transports. He was wrong. But, his logic was entirely rational given the information he had. The consequence for the Marines on Guadalcanal was that their naval support vanished overnight. 4 cruisers gone. They would spend the next 4 months fighting the Japanese army with whatever they had already brought ashore. The United States Navy learned from Savo Island with, brutal efficiency. Within just a year, every new cruiser came equipped with superior radar, integrated combat information centers, and officers who were specifically trained in night surface tactics. The lesson here wasn't really about Japanese superiority. It was about the cost of assuming that tomorrow's war will look just like yesterday's training. The men at Savo Island were not cowards, far from it. They were professionals who discovered, in only 32 minutes, that their profession had changed without them even noticing. These days, the United States Navy drills night surface combat constantly. They practice trusting radar, and they practice sharing information across an entire fleet. They do all of this because of a battle most Americans have never even heard of, where 800 men died in the dark because the systems and doctrines meant to protect them just hadn't caught up to the war they were fighting. If you want to understand why militaries train the way they do, and why the first battle of any war is usually the bloodiest, go ahead and subscribe to War Machiner and share this with anyone who thinks history is just dates and winners.